Hello, everybody, and welcome back to That Milan podcast. Lots of content over the course of these chaotic few days over here in America, where Matt and I are. And Matt is doing very well after yesterday's madness. But today we have a very special guest who we've been trying to get on for quite some time, and it's Enrico Silvestrin of YouTube, one of the bigger, I guess you could say, I don't know in general of all the Milan YouTube channels, but you have to have one of the biggest Milan YouTube channels, especially for Italian-speaking fans in the world. So welcome, and we're very happy to have you here.
Thank you, Martino. Thank you, Matt. I'm so pleased to be here, and I really treasure being here and being able to, discuss this with having the point of view of somebody who's abroad and sees AC Milan and whatever happens around it from a different perspective. So thank you for letting me be here.
Of course. Again, we connected after, I think you saw one of my videos when I was talking about RedBird and the entire situation around the protests back in
I saw
December.
many of your videos. I do watch your videos on a regular basis. So yes.
Thank you. We put in a lot of work. We appreciate it. But yeah, we don't get to really speak to too many Italians in general for, as far as Milan fan goes. There's English speaking Milanisti over here in North America that are kind of more involved in sort of the topics and conversations that you guys have, because I feel like, and Matt, I'm not sure if you know this to an extent, that there is a totally different perspective in how Italian Milanisti view things as a part for people on this side of the world, or just in general, on how they're looking at things. So that's pretty much going to be the topic of conversation today, guys. It's not so much going to be about the transfer market moves themselves exactly. If you're more interested in that, Matt and myself talked about that yesterday. You could go look at that podcast. But today is more about the general ideas and philosophies of RedBird and all the directors that we have involved here. What's Elliot doing kind of involved in this? And this is something Enrico and I had wanted to discuss, because we sort of, and Matt as well, we all see eye to eye and how RedBird are sort of running things. Are they not running things? What is the logic behind a lot of these decisions or lack thereof? So I think it's very important to start with all that. So before anything else, Matt, is there something you want to say before we hop into all these topics, or no?
No, I just want to again welcome Enrico. We always love having guests on the channel. We don't have them maybe as much as we'd like, just because me and Martino, we're kind of like running gun. If he's available, I'm available. We record something. So obviously, it's a pleasure to have you join us, and of course, I think our audience will enjoy you on the podcast as well.
Thank you. Like I said, I'm very happy to be here, so I can be here anytime you want.
Yeah, it took a while. I apologize for the awful schedule I have. So, anyways, it was madness yesterday.
It was unexpected.
So let's go with that. What a lot of people, including myself, Matt, thought, if Milan get a signing over the line, we see Kyle Walker sign, this free agent who's older, not really wanted by one of the better teams in the world, and he's looking for a new adventure. Milan going to sign him because the right back situation is terrible. Florenzi's still injured. Calabria on his way out. He's on Bologna now. Obviously, Emerson Royale got hurt on top of just not being very good. Terracciano, that is what it is there. So getting someone in like Kyle Walker kind of felt like some of the same transfer business that we've been accustomed to Milan doing in recent years. So we didn't really expect this sort of aggressiveness coming from Milan in the transfer market. We had a few ideas as to why, and theories as to this aggression late into the window by Milan. A lot of it seemed to be coming from dressing room friction from Conceição. Certain players, we heard him. Calabria, we saw that issue against Parma. And the same went for Morata after the match against Dinamo Zagreb, that there was some friction in the locker room and dressing room. And Zlatan, go ahead.
Bennacer
as well, who I was going to get to. That, from what we understand over here in the States, maybe you have some better insight to it, because Italian reporting sometimes is very chaotic to understand. It seemed like a lot of these players wanted out and they wanted to leave. And Zlatan, by the way, his comments were this morning during Jimenez's introductory press conference was that, okay, you don't want to be here, we don't need you here. We are going to sell you. We're going to have you move on as quickly as possible. Maybe it's not the best financial deal for Bennacer, but I think a player who's been injured that often and not playing very well, it's hard to get a great valuation for that player. But Enrico, this aggression very late into the window where you're seeing Milan spend money where, 35 million back in the summer is taboo. It's scary that Milan would never do such a thing. But now Milan's in 8th place where there's a huge threat of missing out on next year's Champions League. Now they act aggressive. There's some good ways to be positive about it, but largely skeptical, right? Because why now? Why did RedBird and this management and this ownership decide to act and spend money when they're in 8th place?
All right, there's a lot of meat on the table. I'd say I would start with the lateness. All right, why they waited so long? They didn't really wait the whole time through. With Jimenez, they took a long time negotiating.
Yes.
And that is because of this passion that Furlani has for dealing, for making deals and negotiating. But I would say some other teams like Juventus, they run some kind of faster negotiations and manage to have like Colomwani for already 2 games and being as effective as he's been on the pitch. We decided to take time, and they took a huge risk because when we picked Feyenoord at the draw, that almost made the whole deal collapse. And I was pretty positive about the fact that Feyenoord would have raised, make a raise or something. Which in fact happened because I was waiting. I said, well, he's gonna arrive on Thursday, but then they destroyed the whole timeline by not getting through into the first eights on the Champions League. And then so I said, okay, well, he's gonna arrive here on Friday, but then they picked either Juventus or Feyenoord that made it even more difficult and more complicated. But fortunately, they I think that was the best decision to go for a striker like Jimenez, who's gonna sort it out for the next 4 or 5 years. Was an obvious investment that should have been made earlier. In summertime, you would have gotten him even on cheaper conditions, and I think it was the best forward we could have gotten, because all of the other like top players like Sesko or Gyökeres, they cost far too much money.
Triple.
Yeah,
probably double, triple. Yeah.
Yes, it's out of our range at the moment. But I was cautious because I knew that the reason why the rest of the market was stuck, it's because it was depending on letting players go and selling players, and that is not easy. We don't have many players to sell. We have players we can lend, but we don't really have players we can sell straight away. And they did. I think that they did the best they could do. But every operation in this market came on a like 0-0 basis. It's like Jimenez costs us as much as Morata did. So they let him go. He obviously he had an argument. He fought with Conceição. That's another factor that you mentioned, which is also important because he had rows with apparently, I'm telling you now, Reinders, same problem with Pulisic. And how on earth would you have an argument with a guy like Pulisic? It's really hard to imagine, all right? Or Reinders, but he managed to do so. And so some of the players were.
And you're saying Conceição had those arguments, correct?
Yes. Okay. Yes. It was just not limited to those 4 players. Like, there was more to it. But hopefully it is calm now, and it is not going to have any more fights with these players, and we all live happily ever after. But and ever after is about 6 months, and probably something less for now. But I think that they waited because they had to be sure that one out corresponded to one in.
Yeah.
Right.
And that is pretty much what they did. And they moved accordingly. It's, I think it's pretty much what happened. But I'm not sure that letting Bennacer go was a great idea. I mean, they're all pretty much, they're all upgrades, I think. Jimenez is an obvious upgrade over Morata and Abraham, which they cannot sell. That's why he's staying.
Right,
And
yeah.
Jovic doesn't have a market, so there's nothing they can do with him. Chukwueze, they tried to sell him, they couldn't. They tried to sell the back defenders, which I'm not sure was a good idea because we only have 4 and 2 of them are not in great shape at the moment. But they were ready to sell anybody except the top players. They're not going to sell Theo. They're not going to sell Leao. They're not going to sell Reinders. They're not going to sell Pulisic.
Right.
Well, they're not going to sell Musa for obvious reasons.
Too.
Fofana, obviously, they're not going to sell because that would affect the value of the asset. They don't want to undervalue AC Milan as a whole. They know that it's crucial to have those players in case you want to sell them. In case you want to sell the team maybe in 6 months or have a new partner. So they cannot touch them. They touched everything else and everyone else. And I think that with those restrictions, they did a pretty good job. I think it's a stronger team. It's an instant team because the old players like Joao Felix, you're not going to see him after June. He's got a 6-month contract and that's it. It's just a loan, and pretty much that's the same thing with Walker. They try to make contracts with players for the next 6 months, and that's it. They don't want to affect whatever comes after the 6 months. I think there's a pretty clear pattern in that.
Yeah.
Same deal that Conceição has, 6 months plus. All right. But the plus is something they don't want to decide for whoever might come.
Well, because as well, a lot of people keep forgetting, and we mention it, Moncada's contract is until June.
It's gonna end. Yes.
And almost every single time, as you mentioned, outside of the top players, people who get extensions that are figures within Milan, they're not long. Like, for example, when Maldini initially signed, that wasn't a long contract. The first time with RedBird, I think they had given him 1 more year after the one that he got initially sacked for. So he would have only had been 1 year left right before that. Moncada doesn't have a long contract. Zlatan is a totally bizarre role situation. So
yeah, it is related to RedBird. I mean, whatever happens to RedBird happens to him.
So yeah, Matt, if you wanna jump in here and your kind of thoughts on yesterday to ask Enrico something from like a different perspective from what.
I think Enrico brings up a good point. As far as the market, right? From optics, you look at what Kyle Walker, Jimenez, Bondo, Joao Felix, some of these guys coming in the door, and you're like, whoa, like Milan spent a lot of money, and they but you look at their net spend and you look at the lack of like long-term commitments on those deals. I mean, Bondo is a relatively inexpensive deal. He's still a young player, so that's kind of more aligning with the way they used to operate and still kind of operate. Joao Felix, again, it's more of like a flashy signing, but not a long-term commitment because they know the wages, they know the transfer fee, they know the outlay to get a deal done like that is not really reasonable when there are possibilities of a sale, right? But I think that it's interesting too, right? You look at the fact that Milan are still operating despite all the financial gains they've made in recent years and the headway they've made, with the revenues and everything that's been public. They're still operating on the market with contingencies, 1 in, 1 out, 1 in, 1 out. It's not, hey, we have this team, this nucleus, let's go and get the striker, regardless if we sell a player or two. And I think that is very interesting because I think that they're not trying to do anything that's going to be detrimental in a possible negotiation to devalue or to have depreciating assets that maybe don't hold enough weight to someone when you're selling the club, right? So I think that people have to go and latch onto the fact that RedBird Jerry, all the people involved in that sort of conversation, make no mistake about it. If you didn't know that Milan was being run as a business, you pretty much do now, because I think that they saw there was a lot more to lose by not being active on the market.
Yeah,
and I think
crazy
it's just very
concept,
interesting,
right?
because if you try to do some of these things that they did now in the summer, you're just, in fact, the truth of the matter is you're spending more money and there's not any guarantees there, right? Look what
And
they
you
do with
can
Morata.
only do it, Matt, you can only do it at the end of the market.
Yeah,
These type of operations, you can only do at the end of the
yeah,
market. So if you're still with no players in by the end of August, you have an angry mob of fans,
correct.
which you don't want.
Yeah.
So you have to move. But I think I agree with you. They're operating under the same big, like large concepts.
Yeah.
But there's differences, and they're quite clear. I mean, the type of players, the idea is there's no money ball, there's no rules. It's just occasions. They said, well, Ibra said it. It said we didn't need Walker. We just thought that getting to have Walker at 1 million was a great chance. It was a good opportunity, so we signed him. They never went for this type of deals before. And at the same time, spending on Jimenez and making these type of operations was basically dictated by the fear of losing a lot of money by not but not making it into the first four. And I stress first four because we're not sure. There's no guarantee at all, especially after the UCL draw, that might be a fifth place, the fifth spot.
Yeah, there's Atalanta and Milan falling out of the top 8 is huge.
Yes.
Juve looks shaky. Like, how are they gonna?
Now they're gonna eliminate each other, in one way or another, because you have either Juve or AC Milan, where they're gonna front Inter in.
Right. Okay. So that would have the draw go. Like, even if Milan get Arsenal, that means Juve get Inter. Right.
Exactly. So you're going to lose a team, and that's a big
we
issue.
need Real Madrid to beat Manchester City.
Yeah, exactly. But you need 4 teams ahead of you to
drop points.
to drop. Yeah, and you have to find constancy, which so far you've never had. We always been like a yo-yo, it's like one good game, one bad game, one average game. Never that type of continuity that we needed. And also, one thing that we should spot is that they're getting the whole wages total lighter than before. Bennacer was very costly, and Bondo in allows you to lower that that threshold. And the same thing with everyone else. They're trying to save the season and save the investment at this moment. But I'm pretty sure that this is not the hand of RedBird. This is an overrule. This is an overtake. This is
So we'll just jump into all that, because we were talking about this before we started. So there's like kind of a lot to unpack. I'll just paint the picture for everybody, and then you could discuss what you were mentioning before. So in general, this whole philosophy of RedBird, right, when they took over, and the formula in which they bought the club, was very indicative of kind of how Elliott operated. It's come in, purchase a team when they're still on the come up, like Milan, keep improving year over year in terms of finances. Deloitte Football League talking about it, Milan are 13th in revenue, and there's so much room to grow, because we know what Milan are and what they're capable of being. Right in the mid 2000s, they were still there in terms of profit and revenue that Real Madrid have, but the gap obviously widened significantly in the 2010s because of social media, new TV deals, the way that Milan were so terrible, and how they were basically stuck in the 1960s with the way they sort of operated things. So with that, that's why Milan, have so much potential. It's why Jerry talks about why he liked purchasing them, even though he had no idea how many Champions Leagues they won, all that sort of stuff. So I find it very funny in how that approach went the way it did, just like the same way that he took over. they announced that they purchased the club in May when they won the Scudetto, but they don't officially take over the club until September, meaning effectively that Elliott were running the summer of CDK. And there
Yeah.
was no extra money put in by Elliott, which at the time I found very interesting because I understand the perspective on two sides for Elliott at that point. Why are you putting in more money into a project that you no longer really have a strong part of, right? Because you're selling the team, you no longer have control of it. Why are you giving the club even more money than you already have? And in the inverse of it, there is, why wouldn't you help the club that you have, because you still have a vetting interest in money being invested in there. You still have directors on the board. You have all these people that Gordon Singer is still relevant to an extent. Gordon Singer's showing up to the 125th anniversary. Yeah. You still have this vendor loan out to Jerry in which he has to pay you back. And if he can't pay you back, that just shows you have less leverage in a negotiation for a sale, because this guy doesn't own the club. He does own it. He needs an extension on his loan because it was supposed to be paid back, I believe, in December of 2025, where he now has this extension to pay back.
No, it was August. It was
okay. So
yeah, either July or
either
August.
Way,
yes.
it was due in 2025.
But not, the rate of interest now is 13%.
Yeah, so
it used
not
to be
exactly
7.
like Young Hung Lee, but under similar pretenses, in where Jerry could owe a lot more money if he doesn't get his act in order. So with all of that sort of stuff, we hear you sort of, I guess, insinuate and say, like, this isn't all RedBird's decision. This isn't all this money in the transfer market where they're investing more. And I just like to say as well, a lot of people like to say Elliott didn't invest as much. I need to remind a lot of people, and I'm not making excuses for Elliott. Prior to COVID happening, Elliott put in a lot of money.
Yeah.
That transfer market with Leonardo and how much money was invested in that. Right? There, and even if in the Maldini market in 2019, when Leao came in, Bennacer, and all these other
Piontek, they got a lot of.
There was Piontek, Paqueta, that's 70 million euro worth of players under.
But that's what Elliott does. That's what they do.
Yeah,
it's their prerogative. It's a different prerogative they have. Elliott is restores something that has fallen to pieces.
Right,
they're restorators. All right, that's what they do, and they fix you so they can sell you and make as much money out of it as they can. That's where the plus comes from. I get you at 350 and I sell you at 1 million. That's a profit. RedBird doesn't do that. RedBird is takes a healthy business and maximizes the profits.
Well,
but I think they initially they shared the same type of feeling, but suddenly they became more and more dogmatic. And it started to look like a dogma, right? Like all the players, they have to be chosen this way, and this is the method, and there's no exception. That's how we do business, and we want to change the whole of Serie A. Then we want to change the whole of European football, and we have to set an example. And they wanted to set an example on how to make profits out of the stadium, and basically erase all organized fans. Like the Curva and Milan clubs, they basically what they tried to do was, it was like they tried to reinvent the wheel, but no one followed, because it's such a utopia. It doesn't go like this. You don't, especially and pardon me for this, if it comes from Americans who don't share the same type of knowledge of football that us Europeans or South Americans have and have been having for years. I mean, to make this dogma work would take the whole business to go to that direction. Otherwise, it's just you, and it's stupid.
Right.
Because
you could look silly.
Yes,
like when Barry Maguire's leaving the office in the movie and no one comes with him.
Yeah. Exactly.
Right?
So I think they started to get more dogmatic because it was more convenient. They said, what do we want to do? Do we want to win? And Jerry Cardinale said it blatantly. He said, to base the success and the revenues on wins, it's volatile. It's too inconsistent. It's unpredictable. We need predictability, and that is business that has to do with sponsorship deals and all of the rest. But the point is, they already maximized it. They're not going to go over this. They reached the threshold. That's the maximum.
So where you're saying currently where the team is in terms of success on the field, they can't make more money.
No, they would need
they have to be competing for the title every year and
exactly.
winning and going deeper into the Champions League in order to get bigger deals, because
bigger revenues. Yes,
right. Because why would anybody invest in a team that's sitting in 8th place?
I mean, Inter.
Why are we paying you more money?
Inter makes 6 million less than us on revenues. 6 million, and they don't brag around. They don't brag about with dogmas and theories and reinventing the wheel. You can say probably they don't play by the rules, but that's another aspect. But they do. They stick with what football has always been, and it's about winning. Results. If RedBird wants to win, now it's banging his head on a very hard wall, which is called winning, competing. And when you compete for 4th place,
right,
the whole environment feels it. It's an ecosystem. If you're the owner, you want me to be 4th. First of all, there's no plan B, because the plan B to not getting 4th is losing a lot of money.
Right.
The plan B to not winning the league is I can be 2nd, 3rd, or 4th.
Right.
There's a plan B. But there's no plan B to, trying to float, like he said, and trying to make it 3rd or 4th. And the team feels that type of mediocrity around.
Yeah.
So they don't have any type of, I don't know, what
ambition.
inputs. Yeah, what ambition would they have? Why would they go and die on the pitch?
And it's
metaphorically
funny,
speaking.
And it's funny, Matt, right? And then you could toss it back to Enrico, because we talk about it all the time. And the point is, if you spend more money and you're more aggressive and ambitious, like Elliot were, like, for example, a couple of moves that put Milan over the top. Like, we're making exceptions to bring Zlatan back and paying him money. We're making exceptions for certain players to pay them more money and keep them. I know it didn't happen all the time. That's why some of them left for free. But they were at least understanding the moment to an extent, and what essentially got Maldini sacked, or one of the reasons, right? I'm sure there's so many of them, where it's like, okay, we got you to this point, Jerry. You know why you're able to purchase this team and why this team is so good? Because we just won a league title. We didn't increase the value of this team by just being in 4th place. What really increased it was the qualifications in the Champions League, competing for the title against Inter, and actually having this sense of pride that Milan are able to compete for these trophies. And by them just aiming for 4th place, maybe making it after, again, everyone likes to look at 2nd place. They were lucky to make top 5 the first year of RedBird.
Yeah, we were 5th.
Juve being eliminated. Sorry, top 4. But they were scared in their investments. They kept cutting corners. Morata will pay you 14 million. What happened? He's gone in a few months. You realize your mistakes already, and by them doing that, they're risking a great issue. Like, forget about making top 4 or 5 in the league. If they even spent more money, they would have made top 8, no problem. They wouldn't have had these issues where they're missing certain players or depth or talent when they're facing Dinamo Zagreb, where if they're able to have more midfielders and more options, or another striker, for example, they wouldn't have to worry about that sort of stuff. Like, even when they were like dropping points earlier, like, do they beat Leverkusen potentially? Maybe. So like all those sort of stuff impact them. And then they drop points in the first half of the season, where they're so far behind Inter now. Like, Milan's out of the title race 2 years in a row, where by December, they're not even close. And that sort of ambition is sort of like, okay, we'll fight and crawl for 4th place. It's, you don't make enough money.
They promised us they promised the Scudetto. It's not like they said we're gonna be 4th. Yeah. Because in every press conference they kept bragging about Scudetto, and no one forced them to.
Enrico, so this is also interesting too, because there's been two separate tones or two separate approaches or mindsets to competition, right? You just highlighted it beautifully where you're talking about winning, right? Like, okay, there's that fallback option. If you don't win, it's top four. There have been moments where I've read verbatim quotes where we have to get top four. It's crucial because of X, Y, and Z, all the reasons we know. And then you'll have someone who is involved with Milan, who is vocal, who is on the front lines, essentially when they are conveying to the media, we want to win the Scudetto. This is Milan. This is what we should be doing. So you're seeing that they're not aligning, even at that level. There's not an alignment of what is our aim, what is our ambition. And I think for years, when we weren't a regular back in the Champions League, right? There was always that facade to hide behind, whether it was Elliott, whether it was any other ownership. Well, we don't have top four. We need to consistently be top four to do it. And in a strange way, that kind of gave them an out not to spend, which I think makes that Scudetto winning season and the assemblement of that team, which obviously we still have some of those players, still not many, that much more impressive because we were operating behind the eight ball. When you talk about how much we were spending, when you talk about our revenues, when you talk about a lot of the restrictions and the budgetary limitations that we did have relative to the size of our club,
really. Yeah.
Then they get the Scudetto. Now they're in the Champions League, going on 5 years straight now? It's one of those things where fans can say, hey, you sold us this BS that we need to be Champions League regulars each and every year. Not only have we done that, we've made countless knockout stages. We made a semifinal. Our revenues are great. We've cut wages tenfold. We haven't really spent crazy amounts of money without players leaving, to their earlier point. That's where fans are getting more and more frustrated. There's nowhere to hide now if you're a management. And I agree with you. RedBird is packaging and kind of setting themselves up for a sale. We've been talking about this, me and Martino, for a while. It's been looming for a while. We've read reports, PIF, and all these sorts of potential buyers and investments, and it's been coming up and then kind of making its way out of the media flurry. Coming up, vanishing.
Well, it had to.
This summer, we're going to see some of these things come to a head. I'm not saying a deal is going to get done. I know you spoke on it, but I think there's going to be real, true conversation about a potential buyer this summer.
Yeah, but there's still a couple of things to get past. First one is the investigation over the true ownership, the real ownership of the club, and that has to go away first to let someone, buy something out from who am I buying it from? And I'm sure they're into discussions already. They're talking about it. I'm sure they highlighted potential partners, and I think there's a lot that happens behind the stage that we don't know. And I'm pretty confident that because a lot of fans are worried and and they say, okay, but if we all agree on that RedBird has to go, but then who's gonna come? But this is none of our business. We never decided who had to come. We never decided when Young Lee came into the picture. We never had a word on this. It's basically Elliott who's going to call the shots. So that's why I think protesting is very important and crucial, because it has to show not only RedBird that this is a bad business for them if they have no interest whatsoever on the results on the pitch, but it has to show Elliott that they're not allowed to do the RedBird stunt once again. It's not going to happen.
Right, where you're saying
you keep it and you let someone in
right
at first, and then someone who's going to take the whole ownership of the club maybe in 6 months or a year. Fine, but you have to pick him carefully, because RedBird was an invention of Furlani, and it came in last minute when we were just about to close the deal with Invescorp.
Right.
And that would have guaranteed us a whole different, a whole different new couple of years.
I can't even imagine. So
it's real quick. Can I just?
Go for it.
I think it might go kind of hand in hand what you're probably going to ask, but I mean, here's where I think that fans also too have to kind of understand the reality is of modern day football is, we've touched on ownerships and, ulterior motives and reasoning behind investments and not investments, so on and so forth. I think that Milan fans, to your point, I think you're bang on when it comes to, okay, being very selective with who does take this project, this club going forward. Because on one hand, I've read from many non-Milan fans and Milan fans included, just Serie A fans in general who have watched the league, saying, I don't want all these American owners coming in, because I think Verona just got purchased by an American owner. And you look at the landscape of the league and they don't truly maybe have the best interest of maintaining the sort of footprint and history of the league. It's very special for a lot of people. I mean, you could speak on it. You live in it. You're breathing it every day, living in Italy. But then on the other hand, a lot of these Italian owners that currently still exist in some of these sports, they don't spend money. Some of them don't spend money. There's not that adjustment to get the revenues to where they need to be. To your point, right, where Jerry's saying the revenues are not really just only down to what Milan are doing. It's a collective, right? So I think that that's kind of where me as a fan of just calcio in general am kind of conflicted, because on one hand, I would love for an owner to come in and we still have that semblance of AC Milan, the culture, the history, all these sorts of things. But I'm also torn between wanting an ownership that truly cares about sporting success and winning over just strictly profits, because sometimes they don't always go hand in hand. If you look at some of the historically successful clubs over the years, and there's a book on this, Soccernomics, where they talk about it, the team that wins and is successful is not always profitable. They're not always the best in terms of revenue. So what do you speak to that? Because I think that there are going to be fans that are conflicted.
I think there's exceptions.
Yeah.
Either if we speak of Italian owners or American owners, because there's always Atalanta. They have American owners, but they let the president, the former president, do their thing. They said, well, okay, you just grade. They told Percasso, you grade, what are you doing? You always lack the finances to be stronger. Let us give you the money, but you run
right.
you
day to day.
You run the business
for everybody, right?
And it's beneficial for everybody. In Atalanta, you can see it. They're on top of the league. They're the third. Right. They're in heaven at the moment, and they won a Europa League last year. They're lifting trophies. They doing really well, and they have a splendid sporting environment for their players.
Yeah.
They can grow up, and you see players like cup miners, when they're away from Atalanta, they underperform. Then they take someone like Charles De Ketelare, and it overperforms or just performs when he gets there, because it's a healthy place. It's not a toxic environment like our one. And about Italian owners, yes, there is an exception. Aurelio De Laurentiis spends a lot of money, and is there on top of the league at the moment. And he's buying top players, and he doesn't care. And he's selling top players, and he tries to buy Garnacho. Then maybe he doesn't succeed. He doesn't have that history to sell. We do.
Right.
Well, a lot of players. A lot of players dream of playing for AC Milan. There's not as many players, and Conte said that recently. He said, "Well, this is an end place. This is not some stopping place. It's just not a place where you stop by and before you move to something more important or prestigious. I mean, Napoli has to be that prestigious place, so they're working on it. AC Milan it has always been that. There has always been that goal for many players. See Jimenez and what he said. So I think that I think that Elliot understood that. I think they were fascinated by RedBird's kind of dogma and idea and vision, but they realize that this is completely BS.
They don't understand it. I think when you see someone like Gordon Singer, and the way Gordon Singer really embraced the club and the fandom and the sport in itself, was a better example of what Jerry has done. even if Jerry, for example, like all of his interviews when he goes to these business conferences, and I talked about it in a few videos where he's talking about his investment in the club is one thing. Him not understanding how many trophies Milan had won in their history is a direct reflection of why he shouldn't be owning the team. Not because he's not capable of making them far more successful, but if you don't understand the type of product that you bought, that means he doesn't know how to use it. He doesn't know how to make them greater, because Elliott did the hard job. I think Elliott did the very difficult thing, was take Milan out of the shit show that was the 2010s, make them respectable and a place where players want to sign, right? Because I still always believe this to this day. And if Milan are competitive, and if Milan are able to offer equal salary or salary close enough to some of the top teams in the world, Milan can sign those players. They absolutely can. I think we saw flashes of it even when Bonucci came, right? I understand Bonucci is a different situation because he wanted to leave Juventus, but Milan were still willing to offer him a situation and a role with salary that one of the best defenders in the world, despite Milan being terrible, was willing to come and play for that club because of how the stature in which they are. I think there are plenty of players out there that if Milan were to come in and say, here's our aggressive offer, here's what we're willing to pay for you, we think that you could be a big name. Like, look at Rafael Leao, for example. Leao doesn't get paid that much money compared to some of the best players in the world. There's Joao Felix, for example, makes a lot more money than Leao does. And Leao, in my opinion, is a much better player. Mudryk, there's plenty of other guys within the Premier League that we look at where Leao, if he wanted to really do it, he could go leave and get paid an exorbitant amount of money. But he stays here because of what this club means and how much you could actually raise your profile and legacy as a player is far greater than a lot of places on the planet. And I don't think that this ownership quite understood the situation that they were getting in. I think if RedBird were to come in 2016, 2017, they want to implement these philosophies and these ideas, it maybe would have worked. Where they came in, what their ideas were, how they executed on them was terrible. It was a disaster. I think it cost Milan. I don't think Milan are going to be that bad in terms of evaluation where Jerry is saying, okay, you pay me over 2 billion, for example, to Investcorp. And they'll be like, okay, yeah, that's kind of worth it. Where the squad is, we could make them better. But Jerry could have sold them for a lot more if he did it right. Like he stagnated the growth of the club, probably regressed a little bit, not so much where they're screwed because they're still making a lot of money. It's not as bad financially as it was 10, 15 years ago or so. He stabilized them at the very least or kept them like that, and he hasn't plummeted their stock. So you're kind of talking about, Enrico, of this sort of potential sale, and I think almost everyone thinks that's ultimately what's going to happen. It's sort of when, not how or who. I mean, who is still a question. I think it is a matter of when. When is this going to happen? Because is this over the summer that you think we see a refinance sort of loan from RedBird that sort of extends their time period in which they could pay back Elliott? But that also doesn't necessarily mean they can't sell at any point. What are you hearing? What is your guess that, Milan could be seeing a new ownership, or is it this sort of slow integration of a new ownership where you come in as a partnership, not a partnership, maybe a minority owner, 25% or so, and then a full-blown takeover eventually happens? Like, what are you hearing? What do you think ultimately happens? Because RedBird, by next summer, are they actually the full owners of Milan?
All right. There's
big
a lot
question, I know.
Yeah, it's a big one. First of all, I'd like to integrate, if I may, on the Elliott side of things. We were on a run. And when we won the league, we actually won it a year ahead, a year before.
Correct.
It was meant to happen. It was designed or planned to happen, which was incredible because it meant we were doing really well. Right. So what hurts us is that from that moment on, from the moment Elliott finished their job, basically, because they restore teams. Once you win the league and you're healthy financially, then Elliott's job, it's done. It's over. But I think and they were ready to sell to Investcorp, and that was 100%. of AC Milan, they wouldn't have kept anything. They would have been gone by now.
Right.
But they got greedy. And they understood that there was business around AC Milan that could go beyond their nature of restoring companies. And I think they hired RedBird for the side of the stadium, for the stadium side of business in which they were lacking. So I think RedBird was some sort of, I'm talking out of my ideas, all right?
Okay, all right.
And
theories. These are just theories of yours.
Yeah,
right?
They're just theories. But I really do believe that they were specialists. They said, okay, we have to make the stadium, and it's a huge project, but at the same time we have to run the team. So we need money, and mostly we don't need to be the ones calling the shots. They didn't want to take full responsibility over their actions. So there was nothing better than letting someone else come in, make profit. They knew they weren't going to spend any more money than what was invested, because RedBird is running an investment. It's not their money. Jerry Cardinale has a share percentage of the money that are invested. And it's not like they're going to recapitalize or anything. That's the money. It's not like when they bought Paramount, that was out of RedBird's money. This is a different story. And I think they got fascinated by this whole idea that RedBird had. And obviously, without having any type of basically conception of Italian football or European football, they wanted to reinvent the wheel, and that didn't go as planned, mostly because of a couple of accidents on the way. The first one being the investigation over the sale of the club, and secondly, the fact that trying to build a stadium in Italy is not, and getting hand in hand with politicians, it's not easy. And that explains why Scaroni is in the picture and why he's our president, because he's got nothing to do with us, nothing. But he's got a hell of a lot to do with every ownership, every owner we've had in the past 3 owners. He was there with Berlusconi. He was there with Young Lee. He was there with Elliott, and he's there with RedBird. Why? Who is he? What does he do? He's like a middleman. He's like, he's like a faccendiere. He's like, someone who does things, who solves problems. It's like a Mr. Wolf.
Like an intermediary, almost.
Yes, exactly. And but then when he speaks, he says things that don't happen, or you don't hear from anyone else. It's like a lone wolf. He's a weird character, that guy.
Yes, very, very much.
And he's a mysterious one too.
Yeah.
He's
had a weird history, from what I understand.
Yes,
right?
he's had a weird history, and he's very much related to Silvio Berlusconi. But just last week he said, "I don't see a forward coming. We're not gonna do that."
Yeah. Like he, I know his comments in the past on Leao too are just bizarre. Like there's some of the things that he says, like are you here to help with the stadium, or are you commenting on the transfer market?
Yes.
Like I don't, like his words are supposed to matter somewhat. They carry
you don't know it. He's like a drunk uncle at Thanksgiving. That's him. You don't know who is, if he speaks on behalf of someone, you don't know who he is and what he does.
Right.
And he never showed any interest on the San Donato side of the stadium.
Right. So
he only showed interest in the San Siro side of the stadium, because it's the one related to politics. That's what the politics want. But politicians, they come and go, and they're not going to be there in a year and a half. So they don't want to take responsibilities. They don't want to call the shots. That's one thing in which Italian politicians are specialized in. Never call a shot, because you're going to be,
accountable.
Yes, exactly. You're going to be held accountable for that. so Salah at the same time, the mayor of Milan, he doesn't want to be the mayor who just forced Inter and AC Milan away out of San Siro, but at the same time he doesn't want to lose San Siro at all. It's a complicated business, and he's pressed by the fact that there's the Euro 2032 and then the Olympics. There's a lot of stuff on the table, so they're bluffing. They're all bluffing.
So what do you think they're bluffing for? What do you ultimately think happens with this stadio? Do you think that
everyone in this business around AC Milan is buying time? Same as the renegotiation of the vendor loan. It's just buying time, and they have to buy time because by March, something is going to happen about the stadium, unless they postpone the decision. Then they're also great at that.
Yeah,
and there's the investigation that has to be solved. Once AC Milan gets rid of the investigation, then you're gonna hear about a partner.
So there's two investigations to clarify for the listeners and viewers here. With this investigation, there are two separate ones. There's one of Blue Sky, who have accused, basically, from what I understand, of Elliott not allowing them to know, Blue Sky, who are a minority owner of the club, to know that Milan were being sold to RedBird, and they were upset that they weren't told about this.
It's funny because Blue Sky was part of Elliott, actually was the first owner, and he was the actual owner of AC Milan when the Young Gun Lee came in. And it's funny because Scaroni was in it.
So then it's a funny cast of characters, just like Ferlani was also working with Elliott for a while.
Oh yes, he's another transversal kind of type of character. Yes.
And then I forget exactly when this must have been in 2024, correct me if I'm wrong, but there were the rumors, or it was late 2023, where there was rumors that documents had been uncovered of potential investors for Milan had been linked out into the Middle East. I believe they were linked with Saudi Arabia, and potential not full-time owners buying the club outright, but owners that would come in, buy a percentage, help run the club, maybe invest at some level. I don't know the details on that, but eventually take over as full and main owners of the club. Is this the investigation that you're talking about, where there was these documents that had been leaked?
It made the authorities question whether AC Milan was truly owned by RedBird or if they were running business on behalf of Elliott as the hidden or real owner. All right. Which is not this is not quite a stretch. I mean, it's not that hard to imagine, but it's hard to prove.
I guess it would be interesting because a lot of people view Milan and ownership as it's Jerry Cardinale as the owner. He makes all the decisions, when Milan have a board, and the board is made up of quite a few people, just like a corporate board. Where
CEO and CFO are both Elliott.
Their titles, right? So the board could technically vote on what their decision is and who they want in. Everybody kind of would come and to have a vote. So again, with this investigation, and
they're not going to go anywhere.
So
because it's something you might presume, but it's something that it's very, very tough to prove.
Right.
You're talking about major guys like Elliott and RedBird. You're not talking me, you, and Matt making a deal and getting sloppy while at it. It's different situations. These people are very capable. They're very good at what they do. So I do believe that there's an overtake. Would you call it an overtake in decisions making at the moment, and within AC Milan? I think it's now Elliott calling the shots, and let's say it's AC Milan calling the shots. All right, it's AC Milan calling the shots, whoever that is, and whoever is behind that. But it's definitely not RedBird, and I think RedBird is going to go. Ibra is going to go as well. Do
you think this has become too much of a headache for someone like Jerry? And I see
he's going to lose money. is going to lose money. He doesn't want. He cannot.
Right? There's
lose
no way.
money.
There's no way. I've said this. I think Matt agrees with it too. There's no way that he could really save face right now. The only way they save face is if they magically win the Champions League.
No, well, the only way to
Even
save
then.
face is to start investing. The only way to make more money, more revenues at this stage would be
Right.
to invest on
Further.
on the sport side of business.
They have to.
And they don't want to, because they're it's a dogma, like Matt was saying earlier on. I mean, if they were clever enough, they would have chosen a sport director, a good DS. That's what we call it. We call it DS, sport director. And they would have let the market, with the same kind of restrictions and money and budget, be run by someone good. But the point is, it's they're incredibly they think they're great at what they do, and they're not.
Arrogant.
They're very arrogant. So Furlani wanted to be CEO, and he had no experience whatsoever. And Ibra, he wanted to be like the general director or whatever he does. Yeah. And he doesn't have any type of experience.
And Moncada going from a scout to a director,
exactly
completely different.
Right? Why? Because it's more convenient, because they're not going to change anything of what has been discussed and decided. There's no personality input that might ruin the plan. And, that's something that might come from the wrong trainer. It might come from the wrong player, but not from them. Because that's why they never wanted Conte as a manager, because he's too much of a manager. He wants to call the shots. They don't want people like that. They want to be able to call the shots and set the rules. But the rules are not for our own good. They're not for our own sake. Right. It's just, it's so I think
necessary.
They're safe now. I think the investment is safe now. But if they keep staying into this type of business this way, then they're going to lose money, and they cannot afford that. That's why. And not only RedBird is going to lose money, but Elliott is going to lose money. I think they milked the cow, and they milked it dry. And from now on, if you don't invest and make the team stronger, like really competitive, like to win the league, not to just compete and be fourth, then you're in trouble. That's why they're leaving. That's why I think they're leaving. Yeah. And also they hate the protesters. They really hate the fact that we as fans are protesting. Right. It has a huge impact on their image. They cannot let that happen, because it touches their reputation.
So you mentioned something about, speaking of protests, you had mentioned that you yourself and others will be protesting soon enough, before we get to the preview with Roma and finish this up. So two things. One, your protest, and two, first answer the question of, when do you think a sale of Milan will happen again? Because it looks like there's going to be a fifth owner sooner or later.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I organized a huge protest just outside of Casa Milan for the 15th of February in the afternoon, right before the game with Verona, the home game with Verona. And I really hope a lot of people are going to show up. It's just me organizing this, but there's a lot of people that are more than happy to show up. So I say, if we're more than 100 to 200 people, I think it's already going to be a great result. But my sixth sense tells me that we may be more than that number.
Oh, okay.
And it's going to be all. It's going to be a social protest. So everyone who has an account, like a social media account, is going to go live and shows it, and use hashtags and everything, because we want this to go everywhere. It doesn't matter how many we are there. It matters how wide it spreads. All right. Yeah. And about the other question,
right?
I think that June will see the end of RedBird, but that's my provision. That's my idea.
Okay.
I think June may. I wish that the new owner, they have to build a stadium. They don't have the money to build a stadium. They don't have the money. That's why they switched from San Donato to San Donato with Inter. Inter, they don't want to go there. Oak Tree doesn't play by the same rules that RedBird plays. And they are very willing to sell the whole lot to some good investor. So they don't want to make that decision. They don't want to force the new Inter owner to have to deal with the decision that has been made by other ones, by other people, that forces them to share with us. So they're not going to come to San Donato. Milan keeps the option open because they spent 50 mil on that option to keep it alive. But San Siro is impossible. It's never going to happen. When you hear about San Siro, it's just people buying time. They just choosing not
and when you say San Siro, you're saying purchase San Siro from
the area
stadium
next to San Siro.
Okay, so building the stadium next to.
Yes, not the renewal of San Siro.
We've had that very similar in New York, where the Mets and Yankees, both the baseball teams, had built this stadium directly across from the old one, which is, I guess, the idea that they would have over there.
But it's impossible to get the permissions for that.
It's already impossible enough to build any stadium in Italy. Matt, any final comments on that sort of stuff before we move on to the final segment of the show?
No, I think it's just going to be obviously very interesting to see if things kind of creep out into the media. They more oftentimes than not do when it comes to something like this, especially that again it has been floated around for a very long time. So they'll be very fascinated to see how this plays out.
Absolutely. So, shall we talk about football before we end this?
Yes.
Enrico, Matt, this is one of the weirdest teams I have ever watched in Milan history, I would say, or since I became a fan as a kid. The season makes no sense. Every single time that we think Milan are going to play terrible, they play well. Anytime that we think Milan are starting this launching point, like Matt says, okay, after the victory of Real Madrid, we should do better. Okay, wait, after the Supercoppa victory, we should do better. We have not seen that yet. We have not seen that level of consistency, although Milan have only lost 2 times in Serie A from the beginning of December. Atalanta and then Juventus. Obviously, it looks very funny when you look at it that way because there have been some draws in there. Right now, Milan are in Coppa Italia. They had looked great against Sassuolo, who are still top of Serie B. You can't take away too much from that game. Roma have been awful to start the year, have sort of turned that around recently. Just got a last-second tie against Napoli in the league. So for me, Roma is a very interesting situation and where they approach themselves heading into this match. Very much like Milan, there have been investments within the market. And I would argue that outside of Milan, Roma are the most disappointing team within Italy and Serie A within the league. I think there's no debating that. Milan are 4 points ahead of them with a game in play. So Milan still, despite how awful they've been, are still that far ahead of Roma. They head into this Coppa Italia match where I think this is where Milan can still salvage their season in terms of success. I think this is one of the tournaments that Milan should be able to at least get past this round, facing off against, I believe, potentially Inter or Lazio in the semifinal. For me, I think you come out, guys, minute 1, if Santiago Jimenez is able to play, please have a reborn act of Christoph Piontek, where he debuted in Coppa Italia, had a brace against Napoli, because that's the main thing that I'm thinking of. Bondo is separate in the group training this morning. He's still recovering from a muscular injury, but Joao, Felix, and Sotil immediately back into the main group. So we'll see what happens in terms of those starters. Fofana can be coming back because he was absent against Inter due to his suspension. I don't care. Just win. Figure it out, please. I have no idea how Roma are going to approach this. Matt, you go first. What are your feelings, anticipations heading into this match? Who do you want to see start? And then Enrico, you could go and give your thoughts.
Sure. I would definitely love to see Santiago Jimenez start. I think, a lot of people did ask us, I think when we went live, some of our thoughts on potentially rotating Tijani for this game. I think this is a competition that Milan have neglected in many ways of winning. I think that they've always sort of prioritized Champions League Scudetto, and that's obviously fine, because those are the marquee trophies that you could potentially win every year. But I think when things aren't going the way they are, any strong team with Milan's pedigree, Milan's history should be competing for any trophy possible that they're still technically available to compete for. And that's how I felt about the Super Cup, and that's how I felt about the Coppa Italia. Now, obviously, you're not going to risk certain players. If a Pulisic or a Rafa or whoever is, he kind of had a tough 90 minutes against Inter, or he's just coming back from an injury. I'm not saying that, but I think that this is a competition that Milan should be taking seriously, because the truth of the matter is this: Inter will want to win this. If you're an Inter fan and you look at this competition, you think they're going to be saying it's just the Copa? If they win it, they're going to be celebrating like we did against in Super Cup. So this is something that I definitely want to see Milan win. I do think we'll see some slight rotation. I don't think Sergio is going to be that too crazy and chaotic, because I think he understands what's at stake with the weekend fixtures and what lies ahead in Serie A, which is a priority. But I think that Milan will come out with some sort of pep in their steps, some sort of bounce. And maybe that is something due to the fact that they had a pretty good market, a market that, by all accounts, I think gives them some new life, some new strength. It is a changed locker room as well. So when you see guys like Joao Felix, you see Jimenez, you see some of these players walk in the door, I think the players should hopefully have that understanding, like, okay, like we need to have a good finish to this season. There's a lot on the line, as we all talked about. There's a lot to lose if they don't get top four, if they don't achieve certain sporting successes. So with that, I think Milan are going to come out with a pretty good performance, and I would like to see Jimenez and maybe some of the other guys feature. I'll give a prediction, and then I'll obviously let Enrico go. I'm going to go, it's a tight one. I'm going to go 2-1 Milan. I think they get it done.
Yeah. Roma, very different under Ranieri, Enrico. This one's at San Siro. I mean, listen, Milan have played Roma very well overall. In Italian competitions, I don't think Milan have lost to Roma in over half a decade, since pre-COVID. The only time they've lost to Roma is in Europa League last year. So wow, what is the sense here? I know it's very interesting how Milan approach Coppa Italia. They've only won one time in my entire life, of me and Matt. I'm not sure how old you are, Enrico. You look relatively young. They've only won it one time since the 1970s. So what is the vibe here? Do we think Milan finally push towards finally winning this competition for the first time in 20 years?
I don't know. Scaroni said, but Scaroni is a lone wolf, so you don't have to take it seriously. He said that it's too much, too many competitions, and he said that he didn't really like Coppa Italia. But that's Scaroni. Hey, so I think that this team, we're talking about the two more inconsistent teams of the Serie A. Not only disappointing, but also inconsistent. So what happens after some major changes in AC Milan is that they show a lot of enthusiasm. And this comes as a new boost in enthusiasm with the market after Sergio Conceição already drained it completely. So I really hope that these changes will boost some energy and some the will to make an effort, to believe in themselves, and because what we've seen these players do the whole year, the whole season, is just when it's important, when there's spotlights, they perform well. Without the spotlights, it's like
they go
so
through the
weird.
motions. They go
so weird.
It's like you have people who are depressed, all right? There's not much they can do. It's like it's their brain not producing like some certain protein, and they get depressed. That's what we do. That's what this team with this kind of acid, that's what we do. We drain enthusiasm. We drain ambition. Everything is drained. So
like
that's
how
what
they look against Parma with all that lack of energy, lethargic.
Exactly. So all you can
play
do,
Inter, and then they have all this energy, and you're like,
so you have to artificially boost, some kind of
energy,
enthusiasm, energy, and the market could be that.
Right.
Obviously, this is going to be the curiosity. They'll be happy. Also, let's be careful for what is about the balance of the team, because you cannot play Joao Felix, Leao, Pulisic, and Jimenez. That's a tactical suicide. You cannot go for that. So you're going to have to sacrifice someone. And so he's going to have to make decisions. Also, we're very light on midfield because we didn't have the right market for that. We basically sold one and got one who's not even as good as the one we sold, because I don't think Bondo is an upgrade over Bennacer. And I think, but Bennacer was a doomed player. They wanted to sell him in summertime. Then they understood that they needed him so much because it was crucial, and then they wanted to sell him again. So it's a bit of a strange situation. But also he argued he had a row with Conceição, so it was more doomed than ever. So it's about balance, and it's about how they want to perform and what the priority is. If they prioritize the Serie A, then I'm quite doubtful about a great performance with Roma.
Which is interesting, because how Roma are kind of in the same predicament. Like, how do they approach this? Like,
but then they're behind us 4 points now.
Well, no, exactly. So like they need to also focus on Serie A. So it's interesting, I guess.
So I really don't know. I don't know. I think they if this whole giant maneuver has taken place, it's not for Coppa Italia for sure. That was for to be fourth. So I don't know. We could be good in both, in both tournaments, but it seems like we have to choose one. And I don't know. I agree with you. It's the only trophy we could lift.
Yeah,
potentially.
Like a Champions League is a miracle, and Scudetto is over at this point. So
no.
Do you have a prediction then?
But it's not going to save our economy, our finance. So it's not going to save their investment if we win the Coppa Italia. They're not going to make much
gives
out
you
of
like
it.
a coupon to some restaurant.
And remember that's the mindset. That's what they're after. So I don't know. We tend to have draws with Roma. So I don't know. Maybe extra time.
I think this goes to penalties. I think it'll be 1-1. It goes to penalties, and I think Milan get the edge there with Magnan.
Which is
Magnan's been a little shaky with penalties lately, so he's got to step up.
I think it would be the worst outcome if we consider Empoli like the next game.
Right. Yeah, it's a lot of minutes. It's going to be interesting to see how he makes these substitutions. Enrico, that'll pretty much wrap up the podcast. We appreciate you so much for coming onto the channel. It was a great conversation. We love all of the insight that you provided for us. It's always very interesting to see the perspective of Italian Milanisti and what's going on over there, and sort of the stuff that you hear, because we don't get sort of the same news that you guys get in details. It's really hard to decipher who's legitimate, who's a terrible reporter, and everything regarding that protest you're going to be having on the 17th, I believe you said, correct?
15th, right? 15th, right?
15th, sorry.
15th.
The 15th, 11 days from now, prior to the Verona match. So again, everybody go and check out Enrico's channel. We had it here this entire time. Are there any other places that people can go watch and listen to yourself as well? I know you don't really have Instagram.
No, I don't have social media, no.
Okay, so it's just the YouTube channel.
Yeah.
Which is great. If you speak Italian, go ahead and go in there. If not, it's a great place to learn.
There's subtitles anyways. They're
exactly. So you can
automatically generated. So
so you go live quite often as well, on top of just other videos itself. So it's
after
always,
the games, after the matches,
it's always very great stuff. You get a ton of people in there. Any other final things that you want to just mention and bring up before we finish?
And I just want to say that you do a great job. You both do a great job, and I see way worse Italian YouTubers who know way less than you guys do. So you know a lot. I think you're doing a great job, and congratulations to both of you.
Appreciate it, Enrico. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Very much appreciated, Matt. Everybody can go and find you and your work over here, correct?
Yes, the same old socials at Matt_Santangelo at AC Milan Bros. And once again, thank you to Enrico. And thank you to all the guests we've had on that we will have on in the future. And also thank you to the audience that has continued to support us through all this chaos surrounding this team. It's truly appreciated.
Yes. Again, don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment on this video, on the video from yesterday, on that podcast. And again, go to Enrico's channel, like we had mentioned quite often. Again, you guys can also follow me at Martino_Pucci on Instagram, Martino Puccio everywhere. On top of that, again, this is our passion. This is what we care about. We love to get insights from different people and content creators and YouTubers all over the place. That's why getting someone like Enrico was very exciting for us to do. And we really appreciate you coming on and reaching out to do this. It's been amazing. I love these conversations. I love every single little nuanced detail when it comes to Milan and the sport itself too. So to have that insight in for this episode was a pleasure. It's been a lot of fun. Did a very long episode as well, so I know Matt has to get back to work. Thank you guys so much, and see you next time.